Hey everybody, it's TJ with ShopBot Tools, and today's training we're going to look at flattening log slabs. So we're going to look at these being cut on both a ShopBot desktop and a full-size machine. And a lot of these are from downed trees, found log, firewood piles, and what we need to do here is get them on the machine, hold them down, and properly flatten them or parallel them depending on what the project may be. So we're looking at furniture, clocks, different things around the house that you might use a slab for. But what we need to look at today is these two slabs and these different types of bits, putting them on the ShopBot, getting them cut on the ShopBot, getting them flat, getting them parallel, and let's get right to it. I'm going to reference two different style bits for today's tutorial. The one is a spoil board cutter that a lot of you purchase with your ShopBot, and the reason I'm going to show you that one is it will work, and it's a bit that most of us commonly have laying around in our bit stash. It's just not going to give you as good of an edge quality as this insert based one that has two facing bits on the bottom. So just to look at these, a lot of us are used to this carbide tipped spoil board cutter, which works, but just so you know, it is designed for surfacing MDF and particle board. It will work, and I'll show it to you in the video, but the one that's really going to get you a good edge quality for surfacing log slabs is this insert carbide bit. And again, you can pick the brand that that works for you, that you've used and you're happy with, but I use this bit for this tutorial and it worked great. Again, it will work great on your spoil boards as well, but it also really works well having these two blades along the bottom. The other thing I really want to point out before we get into this tutorial is we're having a pretty large diameter bit that we're going to be plunging down into our material. So a couple tips would be, one is start the bit off from the slab that you're about to cut, meaning don't plunge directly down onto the material. That's a big, either 1 1/4 or 1 1/2 inch diameter bit that's spinning around, and for you to just jam that down into the material, it's going to be a lot of pressure on a lot of different components of your ShopBot. The other thing is really useful to add is a ramp. Have that ramp down into that cut. Don't just have it plunge straight down into your depth. Actually have that ramp down in. So you'll see that as we keep going, and let's go ahead and get started. Alright, before we even get into the software, we need to look at the material we have at hand. So you can see I have some different thickness of washers to use as shims. Whatever you have laying around, I just like these because they're all pretty consistent as far as I have some fender washers that are around a 1/16 of an inch, and then the regular USS flat washers are around an 1/8 of an inch. And of course they do vary a little bit. So you could have some wood shims or whatever it is that you're around. There's nothing flat about this log here, so you're just going to see me place it down. I'm checking to find the most uneven surface, and I'm going to put that one up first and try to mill it. The key right now is not to stress the log. You don't want to hold it down by pulling the warp out of it. You want to leave it naturally the way it is, shim it from underneath, and then mill that surface flat. If you pull it down too tight right now and stress it, and mill it flat, and then as soon as you let the pressure off, it'll just bow back up. So this is one process that's really neat about milling on a CNC machine that a planer can't do. You can actually mill the warp or twist out of it, or in this case obviously the uneven surface. So I'm going to use some wedges where I'll just wedge this from the side. You could also just line it up by eye like I'm doing here, holding it down tight. And again, I haven't set anything up with the software or zeroed it out yet. I'm just trying to place the slab onto the table of my ShopBot. Put some good pressure on that, and I'm also screwing the wedges down in just so they don't come loose, as we're going to be getting in there and milling this out. And it's held down in there good and tight. Alright, next thing is we have the part held down, and we need to find our high and our low spot. So I'm just checking with the level to see where there's gaps, and I'm marking the different low spots so I can see. The level's nice because you can see how far from the highest to the lowest point the slab is actually off, and then I'm marking it with a pencil so I can see. Next thing I also want to do is since this is held out in the middle of the ShopBot, instead of making a temporary zero, I'm going to use my default bottom left corner, and I'm going to measure over that it's 5 1/2 in the X and then 1 1/2 up in the Y. And then I'm also going to measure the size of the log, which is approximately a 12 by 12. So let's go set that up now in VCarve. Alright, let's set up our job here. We're going to create a new file. We're on a desktop, so we're cut size is 24 by 18 is our table. The material was actually a 2¼ inch thick slab, and since we're going to be milling the top of it, we're going to zero to the material surface, and I'm going to leave my XY the bottom left corner, and then what we'll do is we're actually going to set the log in place off this bottom left 0, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And the measurements that I wrote down on the ShopBot spoil board was my X was actually over 5½ inches. So I'm going to grab this layout line so we can see this. I'm just holding my left mouse key down and I'm going over 5½ inches in the X. And then in the Y, if I drag one down from this layout ruler, I come up and that was 1.5 inches. So this is where we actually have the bottom left corner of our round slab. So what we need to do is draw a vector the size of our slab, and then what we will do is pocket it down that we need. So there it is laid out. You could do the approach where you have offsets, and again, it's to each their own which avenue you want to go, but I like to try to show something different in every tutorial. So we're staying with our bottom left 0, 0. That is our default proximity switch 0, 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw our approximately 12 by 12 was the size of the square that went around that log. And I can go up here to my draw rectangle, and again I could place my anchor point, and I could do that exactly where I have my layout line, or I would come down here and I can just use the snapping, and as I drag this up here I can see that with my snapping sizes there's my 12 by 12. So the 12 by 12 is what I just marked out with my tape measure, and that would cover the entire log slab that's on there. But as you find when you start milling these slabs, it's actually a little bit to your benefit to mill outside of the slab. Sure, it's going to take a little bit longer if you're milling out here in no man's land, but think about your bit coming through here. And I'm just going to draw a little bit larger circle so I can simulate this. But as your bit goes back over to one edge, lifts up, and then goes and makes the next pass, where it's actually slowing down here to stop, lift over to the next cut, and make the next pass, it's ramping down in speed. So we're not getting the full speed of the pass as we go across here, which, again, isn't a problem. We're not trying to set a time record here, but what we're getting is it's slowing down, which isn't going to get as smooth of a cut. So what I prefer to do when I'm milling these is to go out past where my log is going to be, bring it up here to the next part, and then mill over here past. And you'll see this in the video, but you actually mill out past this size of your cut material. So let me delete that, and what we'll do is we'll actually do an offset that's offset out a little bit larger than our log size, and we'll do that just a little bit over the bit diameter. So if we're using the 1¼ inch for this one, what we'll do here is we'll actually go out 1.5 inches so it brings it out past, and we'll select the new, and I am going to leave the original one on here just so you can see. And then what we'll do next here is we'll set up the pocket that's going to be, and again we're just making this larger rectangle here so when the bit goes out to make a next pass over, it's not doing it above our work surface. So let's switch over to the toolpath side, and for this is just a pocket toolpath, and the log itself was only about 7/64 as far as being out, which is just a 0.1093. So I'm going to take it a little bit deeper so I get one nice clean cut over the whole surface. So I'm going to take 1/8 inch cut overall, and for this I'm going to select and use that 1¼ inch spoil board cutter. So the first one that we'll see in the video is the one that just has the 2 fixed carbide cutters. So let me select that, and I'm going to call this my pocket 0.125 slab. And what I want to make sure that I do is I actually want to make sure that I'm going to add a ramp to this. And I like to add a good hardy ramp on this because I don't want to be slamming that 1¼ inch spoil board down into this log. And again, as far as if you're going to do an offset here, it's going to start in the middle, where if you do a raster, you can have it do its profile pass first, where you can actually get it to start down here, down in the bottom corner, where it's not starting above the slab. So again, it's so which one that you want to do, but those are my recommendations that I would do. And then go ahead, preview this. You're not going to see the uneven surface that you're going to have out on your ShopBot, but you will see what it's going to do. It's going to make its multiple passes. And then let's go out and take a look at it in action. All right, first things first, let's zero out our machine. So we're doing the X and Y by using the proximity switches. So zeroing our X, zeroing our Y. Then going to use the keypad, and I'm going to move it over here to zero it out. Now notice the first demo we're going to do is using the 2 carbide, and then finally we'll switch it over and I'll show you the difference that you get edge quality using the bottom carbide. So I'm going to the high point back here where I'm going to start. I don't want to mill it all off at once. I don't want to stress it out and try to take off too much. So I started and I zeroed it to the high point, and then here we can see that it's working its way. It's not cutting on the front of the slab because that's where it's lower, but as it moves towards the back, it's starting to cut into the deeper part of the slab and getting it fairly flat before we make the full pass all the way over. And here you can see on the next pass it's starting to go down deeper in. And this is the edge quality that we get here with this first bit. You can see the lines more than what you can feel. Again, it's just, right now it's an appearance thing. You're not going to feel those with your fingers, but you can still see them. Alright, so I took that first bit out, which did a fine job. Again, it just leaves some lines and something that you can sand up pretty easily and get rid of. However, why not use a better bit for this job, which is this guy here. And there's several different brands that make this, but this has the 2 cutters on the bottom, the 2 face cutters, and it also has the 2 side. I really do like these carbide tip bits because one is they have 4 different sides to them. So if you were to hit something and not completely wreck it, you can rotate those 4 different times before you have to replace the carbide. So since I've already gotten it flat, the log face is flat, I'm just putting the new bit in, re-zeroing it, go back to my V-carve and use the same file and just creating that same pocket that I did. I'm just creating another tool path that's only 30 thousandths go down in just to get one more clean pass all the way across to clean that up. And again, you do want to use a ramp for this. This is ramp back and forth as it went in there. Even with that carbide bit, I didn't like how it ramped in the middle. So I went back after this and changed the tool path to start off to the side. Just something about jamming that big 1.5 inch diameter bit down into a log is a lot of stress going on. So you get a little bit better edge quality when you start it off to the edge. And you can see there's a little bit of surface there, not so much as far as what it leaves, but nothing you couldn't clean up real quick with the sander doing it that way. Pull the front side off, take out the wedges, make sure underneath your spoil board is clean, pull the wedges out of there, and just blow that off with your air compressor, dust it off. And now that side is flat, and that should sit down there good and flat. So now we have another uneven surface. This was the better of the 2 surfaces, so it's not going to take as much work, but we should be able to sit down flat. Put our wedges in, we held them. I'm leaving the 4 cutter carbide tip in this time, finding my different level where I'm uneven, and I'm going to mark my spot. And then just to save video time, I went back to the V-carve file, used the same size blank. All I did was change the pocket depth to what I needed to mill down, just like we did on the first side. And then again, set that up. But this time I want to make sure I got my ramp over here to the left-hand side where it's going to go down, ramp itself down in before it plunges in. And then you can see it goes out past the log as it makes the milling. And that, see where it does the turning where it's on the log isn't going to give you as good as where it goes out past. So I try to show you that both on the one side of the next there, where when you can bring it out past the log to make its turn over to the next pass. And then finally here it does the last pass where it's going to make itself down to full depth. And that's the final clean pass that goes all the way across. And with that 4 cutter, it really leaves a good edge. You're not seeing as many lines. Even what you do see, you're not feeling it. It's something that it'll clean up real nice and easy with a disc sander. So put that on there, and now you've pretty much successfully cleaned up your log faces. Got them parallel, got them flat, a little bit of edge work around the side for whatever smooth corners that you need to put on it. and then that log now is perfectly parallel and ready for what you're going to do with it next. Well, let's look at the same process here on a larger slab on a full-size ShopBot. So I've taken on my spoil board and marked a 2-inch border along the X and along the Y. As before, use whatever method of shims that you have laying around to flatten that log. I've got my level up there and I'm checking for low spots. And this one being a lot larger slab has a lot bigger of a gap as far as slab height. You can see right there that the chainsaw really did a number. It's almost as deep as the length of my cutter. So again, I got my shims in there. I got this shimmed. I got it bolted down onto the spoil board. If I was to reference back to the software, this would look just like the first example. Went in there, drew my rectangle, offset a little bit larger one, so when the spoil board cutter there is making its passes back and forth, it's going out past the actual log size. Here you can see that it ramps in down in that bottom left corner. I don't want it to ramp right into the middle of that wood. That's a lot of bit to be jammed down inside of that material. So that's where the cut is actually start off to the side, and you can see here it's not very even. It's almost 1/8 of an inch on the ends, where in the center it's less than 1/16. And it's really hard. You're cutting against the grain in every which direction here. You know, a log as it grows with its annual rings is growing around all the way each year out, and as far as, you know, if we do an offset pass, we're still coming through this thing cutting against the grain. So you can, you know, raster or offset as far as the way you want to tool path this, but I find with this bit just going back and forth along the x-axis here, I get just as great results that I can just pull this thing off at the end. A little bit of sanding with a random orbital sander. Same process as before. Flip it over, go back to your VCarve software, see what you need to do for the next size as far as how far down you need to go, create another pocketing tool path, and this is really the key to paralleling and flattening slabs. So just to show you a project that you could do with your slab, you could either probe the profile of your log, or in this case I took a picture of it and brought it in and did a bitmap trace, and let's show you that in the Vectrix software. So here you can see the bitmap that was brought in. I took a picture straight down of the log, and then I came in, and whether you do a bitmap trace or you use the draw curves, and you can see I drew the outline of the vector. And also what you want to do is take a tape measure and measure across. In this case I measured across at the widest point and got my measurement. And then you can see that here in the bitmap layer. If I turn this off and just have layer 1, you can see that I actually stretched it to the size that it needed to be to fit the actual log. And then you go along with your tool pathing and stuff like you would a normal project. So let's go ahead and show you some pictures of how I went about sizing this. So here's our picture looking down at the log. I took my tape measure at the widest point, measured across. Zoom in here, I can see that it's 11 13/16, and that's what I scaled it to in the Vectrix drawing software. And then I went ahead and toolpathed it like a normal 3D file. And here you can see that it's starting to carve with a 1/16 inch tapered ball nose. It works its way down to the deepest point. And the eagle looks real good on here. I like that model. It has a lot of detail. It breaks up real nice where it's a rough in here. We can see the feathers, and then it's smooth out here, bold down in. It just gives a nice contrast. And as it finishes up, we can see that there is the eagle head in the model. Put a little finish on it. Turned out great. Need a couple more coats to make it look ideal. But what we did here was we took a slab that was not parallel, it was not flat, and using our ShopBot CNC machine, we were able to flatten the log slabs, we were able to parallel the slabs. So just a couple things to keep in mind are when you're first starting to mill your material, you don't want to pull down too hard on your blank where you're actually going to pull the twist out as far as, or the warp out when you're holding it down, because as soon as you let go of that clamp, it's just going to warp back up. So let it sit on there pretty freely. That's why I blocked it in from the side, milled the top flat, and then when we do our parallel flip, we're not only smoothing the second face, but we're also paralleling the two faces. So try this out with your slabs. Also check out some of our other tutorials like milling warp boards and milling twist out of boards. They're all on our tutorial page. And If you have any other questions, please join us next time, and thank you for showing up today. Have a great week, everyone.